Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining our call today. Please give us a few moments. We're going to let a few more folks sign in, and we're going to get the slideshow set up for you. All right. Welcome to today's DMS 2.0 Universal TA call. We would like to get started with a few logistics. Please note that all attendees will be muted for the majority of this webinar. There will be a few different opportunities for Q&A. At this time, you can raise your hand and we'll let you know that we're going to unmute you and you'll have a chance to speak. You can also, throughout the session, ask questions in the questions pane, and we will read those questions during the Q&A time. We will be recording this presentation, so I do have a message I need to read. Please note some of the language talks about your camera, the visuals. This is mostly relevant. You won't have cameras on today. This is going to be relevant for any of those who do want to speak and want us to call on them if they raise their hand. The American Institutes for Research, AIR, allows for the recording of audio, visuals, participants, and other information sent, verbalized, or utilized during business-related meetings. By joining a meeting, you automatically consent to such recordings. Any participant who prefers to participate via audio only should disable their video cameras so only their audio will be captured. Video and/or audio recordings of any AIR session shall not be transmitted to an external third party without their permission. In terms of today's recording, this is mostly going to be for your use, so you'll be able to access the slides and the recording on the program website a few days after the call. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the session over to the Director of MSIP, Greg Core.
Thank you, Blythe, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first TA call, DMS TA call of 2021. If you've been on these calls before, and I expect you have, you know that they're intended as a way to provide universal technical assistance on various aspects of our DMS system. Kate Moran, the facilitator of our DMS implementation team, and Matt Schneer, our Associate Division Director assigned to that team, will be presenting today's topic, but we'll also be featuring some special guests from our TA centers. Before we get started with today's presentation, I've got a couple items I would like to mention. As I'm sure you're already aware, your FFY 2019 SPP APR is due in just a few days on Monday, February 1st. My inbox is already filling up with EMAPS messages indicating that many of you have already submitted your state's SPP APR. Thank you for all your work, and we really appreciate you getting your submissions to us prior to the deadline. Our state leads are prepared to begin reviewing your work next week. Second item I wanted to mention is that we are now in the second week of a new administration, and we're anxiously awaiting arrival of new political leadership for OSERS and OSEP. But until that time, David Cantrell, the OSEP deputy, will be serving as the acting OSEP director, as well as the official delegated to perform the duties of the OSERS assistant secretary. So David will be staying very busy during this interim period. Those are my updates. Now I'm ready to turn our call over to Kate Moran, who will start off by walking you through today's agenda. Kate?
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We can go to the next slide. So today we just wanted to take some time before we turn it over to our OSEP-funded TA centers to talk through our component review of the 8 key pieces within our DMS structure. We're going to highlight at a high level the DMS framework that we have been talking about and some of the intended outcomes that we see as a result of that. We're also going to talk about document requests. We've received some questions about that, so we just want to clarify what types of information we'd be looking for. We're also going to talk about when we complete a DMS component, what that will look like for you as a state, what you might be expecting to receive before we move on to the next puzzle piece. And then we'll have some time for question and feedback before moving on to our OSEP-funded TA Center highlight, which we're really excited about. So we can move to the next slide. We once again just wanted to ground you in the 8 puzzle pieces. I think you have to hit the arrow and they'll pop up magically. There we go. So just to ground us where we are right now, we are in fiscal management. Many states have finished to the kind of the first part of it of reviewing policies and procedures. Some states are still sending some documents or having conversations with their state leads, but we're in fiscal management. As you can see there, those are the 8 other puzzle pieces that we would be covering with our DMS 2.0, but just wanted to remind where we are in the process. Next slide. So we will be posting this, well, I think by the end of today, probably early tomorrow, you'll see it on our DMS 2.0 website, and that will be posted. It's on the sites.ed.gov and it's under DMS. So if you look there, you'll see this document later today or tomorrow. The framework that we've been working on will really outline that the purpose of DMS 2.0 and then how programs are going to be monitored through their general supervision system. So you can see there it's focused on improved outcomes and results. It has the various components that we've been talking about. It's integrated across all of those components. And really the focus will be on educational results and functional outcomes and ensuring that you, the public agencies, are meeting the requirements that we have a responsibility under Part B and Part C. Next slide, please. This framework is outlined with a couple of different areas. So you'll see within each framework, within each component of our DMS process, there will be a definition, a series of if and then statements, and then an ultimate outcome, an intended outcome that we're seeking to achieve. You'll also see some examples of evidence that we may be looking at for a particular puzzle piece. I know that's been a question. We're incorporating those evidence, those items that we might be looking at in the protocols as well, but we wanted to place them in this larger framework documents that would be available to you. I'm now going to go briefly through each of the large kind of if-then statements for each of our components. So if we want to go to the next slide. So our first area, as I've talked about, is fiscal. Our original intent was to carry that out through October and November. It's kind of carried over just based on the work that state leads are doing. But if a state has an effective fiscal management system, then that state will have an effective fiscal management system which contributes to the improved outcomes for infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities. And on the framework, you will see a couple of different, more specific areas that we're looking at to achieve this intended outcome. Next slide. The next area we'd be looking at is integrated monitoring. So if a state has an effective integrated monitoring system, then it will contribute to improved outcomes for infants, toddlers, and youth with disabilities. Next slide. The next area we would be looking at is sustaining compliance and improvement. So if a state has a system designed to sustain compliance and improvement, then this will contribute to improved outcomes for infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities and their families. Are you seeing a pattern here? So go ahead to the next slide, please. Dispute resolution, we want to look at a state's dispute resolution system. So if a state has an effective dispute resolution system, it will contribute to improved outcomes for infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities. Next slide. Technical assistance in PD, we don't want to forget about how important that is. If a state has an effective system for targeted technical assistance and professional development, then we'll see improved outcomes for infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities and their families. Next slide. And the final area for phase 1 activities is data and SPP APR. So if the state has an effective system to collect and report timely and accurate data, then this will contribute to improved outcomes for infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities and their families. Next slide. So as I shared, we will be posting that framework. We also will be posting this PDF or this PowerPoint presentation. It'll be posted once the recording of today's presentation is posted. So with that, I'm going to send it over to Matt.
Good afternoon, everybody. Before I move on with the slides, I just want to take a moment. And yeah, you can, Blythe, you can stay right there. Thank you. I want to just take a moment to thank everybody for taking time out of your really busy schedules to be on this call today, and more importantly, to thank you and your staffs for all the work that you're doing for infants, toddlers, children, youth with disabilities and their families. We know what a challenging time this is for everybody in this country, particularly for the populations that we all serve, and we truly appreciate your commitment to that. We know that President Biden has made clear that one of his priorities is getting kids back in the classrooms, back into getting the services as they were intended to begin with, and we're also committed to that. So look out for more information related to that, but I just really wanted to thank you for that. I know getting the APRs in, taking care of this is not always the most important thing that you do because you have to serve the kids. But we appreciate the attention you give to what we ask of you, as well as the important work you're doing every day. So thank you so much. So just into this slide, we have gotten, as Kate mentioned, a few questions related to documents, and I wanted to give some reminders and just talk a little bit about this. So as we've talked about, the focus of phase 1 is looking at your policies and procedures related to the different components or puzzle pieces that we've been talking about. When we look at documents and we see if you have additional documents that may be useful, for phase 1, we're focusing on the policies and procedures, not in implementations. And we are trying to work to limit the volume of the document requests. We've heard from some states that it feels a little bit overwhelming at times. We encourage you to work with your state leads to see what really is required and what isn't required, or what is helpful and what isn't helpful. We know that sometimes the tendency is to try to give us everything under the kitchen sink, and we want to try to limit it to the policies and procedures and what is needed. And if you have any concerns about that, work with your state lead, or if you want to reach out to me, feel free to do that. We can work with that moving on. One issue that has come up is that is the issue of personally identifiable information, PII. I want to make clear that for phase 1, we do not expect any documents with PII. As we're focusing on policies and procedures, there should be no reason why we would have any documentation with PII. So we encourage you, although it is within our purview in the monitoring process to receive PII, that's not outside of the requirements, that's not something we're looking for at this time. In limited circumstances, when we move into phase 2, there might be situations where we would need something that might have PII, but that's something we will address then and be very specific about it. In general, we would prefer not to have any PII because that puts certain burdens on us in order to protect that information as well as on you. So I just wanted to raise that question there. You can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so many states have actually completed their fiscal management component. Other states are moving towards finishing that. We've been getting questions about what happens next. And I know the big thing out there is when we are going to get the next set of protocols to move on to the next activity. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But for now, what we just wanted to let you know is that as your state completes the phase 1 monitoring activities, what we should anticipate, in addition to being thanked on the phone, will be an email from your state lead, which will provide the information that's here on the slide. It's not going to be anything very specific about what we did learn or not. It's really just meant to signal that we're going to transition on to the next component. We will obviously reserve the right to revisit issues if there are more questions. And if we do have any concerns, we will notify you about that under separate cover. We're just finalizing the template for those emails, so you wouldn't have received that yet, even if you have completed the process, but you all will in the near future. Thanks. We can move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so just a few things to note here before we hand it over. We do have another universal TA call scheduled for February 25th. We will be also, for those of you in cohort 1, likely scheduling another cohort 1 call for the month of February. I wanted just for a moment to address the elephant in the room, and I don't have a great answer to the question. We know that everybody wants to know when the next set of protocols are coming out. We've been talking about them for quite a while. What I can tell you is that we are getting very close. We are finalizing the final edits and responses to comments to try to get final clearance to get them cleared, to get them posted. We certainly had hoped to be able to have them out by now, and we're sorry that they're not there, but just know that we're working as hard as we can. In terms of what your next steps are and your next activity, if you finished your fiscal, the fiscal management portion, that's something you should be working with your state lead on, and they will keep you abreast of everything as we move forward. So we're working on this. We're also aware of the schedule, and we'll be communicating about any changes that need to occur because of the continued delay. So just know we'll communicate with you as much as we can, as soon as we can, about these issues. Then right now we're going to move to transition in. For this month, we're really excited that NCSI and IDC agreed to collaborate with us and to spotlight some of the relevant resources for the work that we're about to move into about integrated monitoring, sustaining compliance, and improvement. We want to make this a regular feature moving forward. We see our TA partners as just that, partners that are working side by side with us. We work to monitor, they work to provide technical assistance to you that should help you in that process, and we want to help give them the opportunity to spotlight what we think will be great resources. In today's call, we're going to be focusing on Part B resources from NCSI and IDC, but we have been in touch with ECTA and the DAISY Center, and they are eager to present in upcoming webinars and national T calls as well. So with that, I'm very excited to hand it over to our colleague and partner, Susan Hayes from NCSI. Oh, I'm sorry, my fault. Thank you very much, I forgot. We are pausing here before we move on to transition to take any questions that you may have about what we've presented or anything else related to DMS. So are there questions that came in through on the question site, or anybody that wants to pose questions right now?
Yes, I just want to share, there's one question related to where the protocols will be posted, and they are and will be posted in one place on our sites.ed.gov site under DMS 2.0. So I'll work with Blythe. I think she has that, and we'll post that in the chat. It'll also be included when this presentation is posted. I think we've tried to include that on each call that we've had. The state leads also have it, but they're all posted on our sites.ed.gov under DMS, and there's a drop down for DMS 2.0. Right now, you'll see 3 documents, 2 related to the Part C protocol and 1 related to the Part B protocol. Are there any other questions before we move into our TA Center highlight? I think you can raise your hand if you want, or type them.
Just give it just a moment to see. I've been telling everybody that we know what the real question is, and we don't have the real answer for it, so we understand if there aren't any.
And just time-wise, maybe. Okay, go ahead, Blythe.
Oh, I don't see any hands up yet.
Okay.
Okay.
Then maybe let's move to Susan, if you want to begin. We'll get your video on and we'll mute and hide.
Hi, thank you, Kate. Thank you, Matt and Greg, and hello, everyone. We're so excited to be on the call today. My name is Susan Hayes, and I'm with NCSI, the National Center for Systemic Improvement, and I have 2 colleagues that are going to join me today in presenting, Nicole Garcia, as well as Heather Reynolds, and we are all members of the Results-Based Accountability and Support Team, which we'll talk a bit more about in a second. And Heather's actually with IDC, to completely confuse everyone, but we're so thrilled to have a partnership with IDC on our RBAS team and with NCSI. So thank you, Blythe. If we could go to the next slide. And we just wanted to start by saying that, similar to Matt's point about us all being partners, we're here to partner with all of you to support you through this DMS experience. So we have TA facilitators at NCSI assigned to every state. So please know that we're here to support you through the life cycle of DMS, the preparation process, phase 2, through the monitoring process, and anything that follows. And Nancy will speak about this a little bit later in the IDC portion, but NCSI and IDC are also really thrilled to be collaborating and hosting a shared interest group, a SIG, for states that are in cohort 1 and cohort 2. Those cohort SIGs meet separately, but may meet together periodically. So we have regular meetings and a shared virtual workspace. So please just always feel free to reach out to us at NCSI, and I know Nancy will say the same for IDC, if there's any way that we can support you all in the field with your DMS efforts. So if we go to the next slide. Thanks, Blythe. And one of the resources we wanted to highlight today on this call are what we call our Fast Fives. And these have really emanated from our Results-Based Accountability and Support Team, or RBAS team, and that's a group that really focuses on general supervision. And specifically, we support states to design, implement, and evaluate general supervision or accountability and support systems. We often use those phrases interchangeably, that are designed to improve outcomes for students with disabilities while ensuring compliance with IDEA. And if we go to the next slide. Thank you. I just wanted to highlight, we have an amazing community of states that are part of our RBAS Cross-State Learning Collaborative. So shout out to all of our RBAS member states and friends. The Fast Five resources that we'll share today have really been inspired by this community of states and their preferences for resources and needs, and they've been an amazing source of support as we've worked to develop these resources. So really grateful for our RBAS community that stretches coast to coast and in the Pacific as well. And if we go to the next slide. So what are these Fast Fives? Not to be confused with the Fast facts that OSEP has developed, which are beautiful resources, data visualization of all sorts of different data points. So it's funny that they sound similar. But our NCSI RBAS Fast 5, if that's not a mouthful, are designed to be just really short, sort of bite-sized resources for states that focus on a component or components of general supervision systems. So something hopefully that you can pick up easily and use at the state level. We've heard some states have used them in trainings with LEAs. So we're trying to keep them, hopefully not more than 3 pages. And again, just really accessible, short resources. And this is the link where you can access the collection of these Fast Fives on our website. And if we go to the next slide. Thanks, Blythe. And so we just also wanted to point out, like, why might these Fast Fives be useful? Oh, and thank you so much for putting that in the chat box to you all as you're engaging in the DMS work. And these were a couple of thoughts we had. There may be other ways that you could think of using them, but they could be useful in just building shared understanding among your staff about key requirements of the law. They can also hopefully really help deepen understanding at the state level about characteristics of results-driven accountability and support systems, as well as potentially point to components of your system that you'd like to highlight and share with OSEP as you go through the DMS experience. So those are some of our thoughts about how these Fast Fives might be helpful to you in your work. And if we go to the next slide, we just wanted to kind of quickly walk through the collection of Fast Fives that we have available at this point, and then we'll give you a chance to tell us what other Fast Fives might be useful to you. So right now we have a total of 7 in our library, and these are the first 3, and I'm going to go through in a little bit more detail in just a minute. 5 things to know about state and LEA determinations, 5 questions answered about including results in LEA determinations, 5 questions answered about risk assessments. And if we go to the next slide. Thanks, and then 4 more. And again, we'll talk about these in a little bit more detail, but considerations for if you're planning to incorporate results data into your general supervision system, whether that's LEA determinations or beyond, as well as some strategies for centering results data in your system. Both of these 2 I'll mention, and they're asterisks here. We developed these in collaboration with IDC, which we really appreciate the partnership when these Fast Fives really delve into issues around data. There's one as well, thinking about ways to authentically engage stakeholders in the process of developing an RBAS system. And then finally, some lessons learned from states that have gone through the process and have reflected back to say, what have they learned along the way? So that is the totality of the Fast Fives that we have available at this moment. We'll unpack these in a little bit more detail if we go to the next slide. And I'll say to you, you're probably catching on to the construct of 5. So each of these will either address 5 questions that will be answered, or 5 considerations, or 5 strategies. So that's kind of how the 5 structure fits in. And I'm not going to go into too much detail on all these. They're in the resources if you're interested. But so 5 things to know about state and LEA determinations will address things like just the background on the requirements, data that must be included in those LEA determinations, levels of determination and enforcement, and then the public reporting requirements around LEA determinations. So those are the 5 things to know. And then if we go to the next slide, and thank you so much, Blythe, for moving the slides for me. So the next one is around, what if a state wants to incorporate results data into their LEA determinations? And there are 5 questions answered in this second brief about that concept. Why might states want to do that? What results data are states using in their calculations? How are states scoring those LEA determinations, particularly when including results data? How are states using the results of those determinations? And are there any lessons learned or advice from states that have incorporated results into their LEA determinations that they would offer to their colleagues? And if we go to the next slide. So risk assessments, we also answered 5 questions here. These are questions we have heard over the years quite a bit from states. First and foremost, what is it? Are states required to use them as part of monitoring? How might a SCA use a risk assessment as part of their overall system and monitoring process? How are states choosing to organize their risk assessments, and what kinds of data points are states choosing to include in their risk assessments? So hopefully that gives you a little sense of the flavor of what these resources look like. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic to my friend Heather to talk us through the next two Fast Fives.
Thanks, Susan. I'm Heather Reynolds, and I'm glad to serve as IDC's representative to NCSI's Results-Based Accountability Systems Group for States. Blythe, we can go to the next slide, please. The next two Fast Fives we'll talk about are a really great example of the collaborative efforts of this partnership, and we'd like to take a moment to just acknowledge the 5 states that shared their own rich experiences: Colorado, Indiana, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Vermont. We really appreciate their willingness to share what they've tried and what they've learned from their work. Their insights were used to develop the briefs that Nicole and I will be talking about this afternoon. As we move to the next slide, please. We'll look at the first of the two Fast Fives developed through NCSI and IDC collaboration with these states. From our conversations, we developed this brief for those that are considering including results data in their general supervision systems, either for the first time or those that may want to modify the way they include results data. The experiences of the states we talked to really reinforced something we've all experienced: the importance of collaboration and communication whenever you're planning for change, as well as planning for the process to be iterative. This brief also includes some specific questions for states to consider as part of this process. And if we can move to the next slide, please. This Fast Five also has a focus on data and can be useful to states who want to put data at the center of their general supervision system. States may design such systems to model data-driven decision-making processes for their LEAs and to align with other SEA efforts. Across both of these briefs, you'll notice an emphasis on clear communication, thinking about multiple levels of your system, and ways to use data to assess, guide, and support efforts across school, district, and state levels. Next, Nicole's going to share 2 additional briefs.
All right, Blythe, next slide, please. And thanks so much, Heather. From our Fast Five for engaging stakeholders in the development, implementation, and evaluation of a results-based accountability and support system, our participating states highlighted the following recommendations. Plan for the initial and ongoing role of stakeholders. Involve those stakeholders in designing both accountability and support systems for districts. Collect and incorporate feedback received from your LEAs along the way. Consider your district needs and priorities, and finally, embrace the iterative nature of the system's redesign process. Next slide, please. We also wanted to highlight some of our overall lessons learned from our participant states engaged in this work, and they are clearly messaging that the goal of the system is to improve student outcomes, engage stakeholders internally and externally to the SEA to ensure a strong system design and increase buy-in, differentiate LEA accountability and support activities, intentionally deepen capacity at the state level to engage in results-based work, which might include shifts to mindsets as well as skills, and be flexible and adjust as needed. Expect that this type of culture and practice change will take time. Next slide, please, and I'm passing back to Susan to wrap us up.
Thanks, Nicole and Heather. And we'd like to pause just for a moment and see what would be most helpful to you all. We'd love your input on future topics or questions that you would like to see these Fast Five type briefs address. And specifically, given the context of today's call, if there are any Fast Fives that would be helpful to you and your team as you experience the DMS process. So I think folks can put their ideas in the questions box or raise your hand if you'd like to chime in over the phone. And if you don't have ideas today, please always feel free to reach out to your NCSI TA facilitator or to any of us that have shared today. But we genuinely want to create resources that respond to your needs, particularly in the context of DMS. So we'll practice my wait time and see if folks have any suggestions for our team as we think about future Fast Fives that could be helpful to you and your work.
Hi, Susan. I'm not seeing any hands up or questions yet, but we'll give people a few moments to finish typing or raise their hand.
Thanks, Blythe.
So we did have one comment in the questions box, and it says prop share requirements.
Oh, proportionate share requirements. Okay, that's helpful. We'll make a note of that. Thank you so much. Right, there may be some elements of this fiscal component where it would be helpful for us to think about some Fast Fives. We could also partner with Cypher in that regard if needed. So I appreciate that suggestion. And again, welcome. If you may not have thoughts today, but moving forward, we really welcome your input. Our RBAS states have been wonderful too with some ideas, but please keep them coming. We really want to generate Fast Fives that will be responsive to your needs. So anything else, Blythe, that's come through?
I did see one hand go up, but it's gone back down.
Okay.
So as of now, no, there are no more hands or questions.
Okay, thanks, Blythe. Well, and thank you again for the chance to share these NCSI resources with you all today. And I will pass the mic to my friend Nancy.
Thank you, Susan. Good afternoon, everyone. And Blythe, if we can go to the next slide, I think. Right, so good afternoon. I'm Nancy O'Hara with the IDA Data Center, IDC, and just as you've heard from NCSI, we want to share some of our resources to support you as you're either going through DMS Phase 1, looking forward to being Cohort 2 next year, or looking to the future for that. So if we can go to the next slide, Blythe. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is just your individual resource in your IDC state liaison. You know, as a center, we're working hard to make sure the capacity of each and every one of our liaisons are up to date and they're informed so that they can support states as you're thinking about DMS, whether it is meetings with OSEP during a DMS meeting, whether it's preparing for some of the DMS activities, maybe it's helping you plan ahead, thinking about what's going to happen. I know I'm in Cohort 2 next year, so let me work with someone to kind of help facilitate some of our planning or timelines, or in collaboration with other TA centers. I know that IDC and NCSI are working together with a number of states in Cohort 1 this year, but we're also more than willing to partner at any time and provide the support as both centers. And if we can go to the next slide. And as I believe Susan already mentioned this, we have the IDC and NCSI are collaborating to provide what we are called shared interest groups, or SIGs, and we have one set up for Cohort 1. There, you guys are actually meeting tomorrow afternoon, and we have one set up for Cohort 2, which right now is meeting every other month, and they meet next week. And so we have regular meetings, and our idea there is we have a common workspace for information. We're trying to develop resources that could be beneficial across states. All of you who are not yet in a cohort, hopefully some of these materials and discussions will also benefit you as we move forward. So we're trying to identify ways as a set of centers and as individual centers that we can support our states, all of the states, to move forward. And if we could do the next slide. So what are a couple of the IDC resources that might be useful with DMS planning or preparation, especially when we're thinking about the phases that you're about to move into and some of the things to come? So I really have two resources that we're going to focus on today. The one on the left is the SCA Data Processes Toolkit, which we're going to take a little bit of a closer look at. And, well, actually, these are both about the Data Processes Toolkits. I didn't read my own slide well. So IDC has this set of data process toolkits. There's the SCA level, and we also have the LEA level. And although today I am going to focus on the SEA level ones. The LEA are similar, and they're meant for states to be able to use, even with IDC help, with the LEAs to document their data processes. You see the link at the bottom of your slide, which Blythe has said those slides will be posted for all of you. If we could move to the next slide. Thank you. The SEA Data Process Toolkit is a collection of templates to document every single Part B data process that you have to report. So it's all of the 618, all of the SPP APR indicators, as well as a few others like an overall state landscape, significant disproportionality, and LEA determinations. You just heard the NCSI documents, IDC collaborative documents talking about LEA determinations. And so we have the data process protocol to document once you make all those great decisions that were in some of those other FAST 5. So they kind of all are so this toolkit also you can use. It's really important. We've all learned that data is as good as the quality and the reliability and the validity of the data. So it's very important. These toolkits, these reporting processes, the documentation will help you develop a much more consistent practice that you can review from year to year. It's going to build the capacity of data stewards. And with many of the states we've already worked with, what we've learned is it's also great when you get new staff in and there's now some documentation that helps somebody, a new Part B data manager, understand a little bit more about what they're supposed to do. Or if you're a new state director or state administrator and you're not very familiar with the data reports, then these data processes can help you become more familiar and understanding of what it takes to have valid, reliable, and consistent data. Most of the protocols in this are customizable so that they can be adapted because there's nuances in every state and we understand that. So they're adaptable, and as well there's a calendar for data stewards so you can have an overall map of what data is due when and when you have to start to report exiting data in November. How early do you have to start pulling things out? So there's a calendar that can help put all of that together. The other thing about the data process toolkits is that they're intended to be a facilitated process. They're on our website and anybody can access them at any time, but we've learned, and we've learned some the hard way, some the easy way, that if you have a facilitator, if you have an IDC staff person who's kind of trained in these protocols, we can help you get the documentation done thoroughly and accurately. And then we also will prompt you as your state liaison, if we were your state liaison, to renew it every year and review it every year, not renew it, review it every year so that it's up to date. We also know it's iterative all the time. The way you do things, the way things happen in a state changes constantly. It's iterative. So this is just also a reminder that you're going to review it on an annual basis. And if we could go to the next slide. So we do have protocols. I already said this. I jumped ahead of myself. For all of the Part B 618 data collections, all of the APR indicators, which of course we'll have to update some of those before next year, which we will probably start working on February 2nd. There's also, we have one for annual LEA determinations. We have one for significant disproportionality. We have the state landscape, which is kind of the big picture of like what are the main databases you use in the state, what are the big systems of a state uses. And then we have a business rules one, which I also haven't talked about, that can support any of the other protocols. What are those fine, minute, detailed business rules that go with supporting any of the data collection? So we have all of those that can work together. And the next slide, please, Blythe. So this is just what an And so certainly for 618 data collections as opposed to SPP, the content will be slightly different, but in general, the bullets that you see on this slide are the topics that are on any of the protocols. And so it's what is the description of the data collection, how is it measured, does it have targets? We know 618 doesn't have targets, but for targets for the APR, who are the data stewards? Who are all the people that touch the data? What department are they in? How do I get a hold of them? All of that kind of information. What is the data source description? What is the collection and submission schedule? And then when we move to the processes section of each of those protocols, it's about the actual collection process, step by step by step. And then how do I validate data? And how do I conduct the analysis of the data? Are there some things I have to respond to? What here it says OSEP required action, so that means we're probably talking SPP, but there's also how do I respond to data quality notes if it was a 618 data collection. What are your internal approval processes for these data? What is the data governance, as well as public reporting when that applies. So we tried to cover everything related to data, but I also said it's customizable, so you can add another section. There may be something your state likes to record and wants to record in more detail, so you can always add sections too. So we try to make it useful, and we think with DMS coming, and those of you that are working on that, to have many of your processes for these data will be very important. So you can talk about how you collect the data, how you are assured that you feel that how confident you are that it's valid and reliable data. And if we could go to the next slide. So as I wrap up the SCA data protocols, I just wanted to mention again, there are LEA ones too, which you can use as a state with your LEAs, and IDC is also willing to work with you to facilitate those. Again, they were very similar, but it's to help you get, help your LEAs improve their data quality. So now there's one more I wanted to talk about today, and that's the data meeting toolkit. You can see the link for this one as well on the slide. This is a whole set of tools, toolkit with a variety of components, and if we could go to the next slide, to help you as a state plan for and conduct meetings that are about studying data, whatever kind of data it is that needs to be studied for whatever purpose. It might be related back even to some of those things we just heard about from NCSI, like LEA determinations, or even taking a deeper dive and looking at a risk assessment or any other kind of data you're looking at now for your SPP, or thinking about improved results. We know DMS is a focus on how your general supervision system is helping to also improve results. So we can use these for any of these kind of data to better understand the data, support more sophisticated data analyses, thinking about root causes, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of uses for the data meeting toolkit. If we go to the next slide. It has many different sections, and what I showing you is just one little screenshot that shows you kind of things you want to do before the meeting, things you will do during the meeting, and things you might want to do after the meeting. And it is very generic in its toolkit format so that you can apply it to any particular set of data that you need to focus on. However, then there are within the toolkit some examples that are more specific to certain pieces of data. So you may want to do that. But this is just kind of how the components of the toolkit are. Again, many of them are adaptable, modifiable by you. There are agendas, sample agendas, lots of resources in there to make it as easy for you as possible to do that without having to even like think about a format for an agenda. There's one there you can adapt for your use as an example. And if we could go to the next slide. So that was the data meeting toolkit. So we've shown you a couple of tools. Of course, IDC being a data center, we have lots more data resources that we could share with you and work with you on. I would encourage you to reach out to your state liaison for support. On our webpage, you can see a map like this. You just have to click on your state and you'll know who your liaison is. If you don't know, we're willing to listen to any question, help you with it. And if we're not the right center to help you, we'll help you get in touch, of course, with the correct center as well. If we could do the next slide. That's it. So here's our website. Here's how to find us. We hope that you'll reach out. We'd love to work with you to help support you as you think about DMS. So thank you. And I believe am I turning it back to Kate or maybe Blythe?
Well, Nancy, you do have one hand up. I don't know if you're taking questions now or in a few minutes, but wanted to let you know.
Sure.
There's also a question in the chat that I think would be good to address. So go ahead, Blythe, you want to manage the hand up?
Sure. Sue Stone, I think you've had your hand up for a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and give you a chance to speak. It looks like you're also self-muted, so I don't know if, there you go.
Thank you so much. I am very sorry. I don't know how my hand was up. So that was an unintentional happy accident, perhaps. You know, in the technology age with all the fumbling we're doing, I'm quite sorry that was an unintentional hand raising.
Okay.
No worries. I can unmute you then if
Thank you.
Go ahead and unmute you. Oops. So we do have another hand up now, and I can go ahead and, oh, your hand went down. Maybe that was another happy accident.
Well, while we're figuring out those, Nancy, there was a question about, are these resources useful for Part C folks as well? And I think you said for some of them, they're generically created. I did share that we are hopefully going to have Daisy present next month. But I was just wondering if you could share how perhaps some of these might be utilized or not.
Absolutely. The data meeting toolkit is extremely, it would be Part B or C neutral. It could be used for any kind of data meeting. The data process protocols are about specific APR indicators or data collection. So they really are Part B specified documents. The process could certainly be thought about for Part C, but our documents would not support themselves with Part C. But absolutely, that data meeting toolkit with all of its components could easily be used by Part C.
That's what I thought. Thank you for that. Let's see, I think there's another. Yep, there's a comment that says Daisy is adapting and updating the data processes toolkit for Part C, so that's great. And we do, I have reached out to, as Matt and I shared, that on deck, I believe for next month, we'll have some of our other OSEP funded TA centers presenting resources. Our hope is that throughout some of these calls, highlight those tools and tips, tricks, things that they're creating to assist states throughout this process. So anything else, Matt, that you wanted to add? I don't see any other questions in the chat.
No, I just wanted to really thank our colleagues from NCSI and IDC. We didn't give them a lot of notice, and they were so happy to participate in this. We really think it's of great value. We're looking forward to moving ahead with this. Again, I would thank everybody for participating in today. Thank Kate so much for all her work. I have to do that a lot because it depends so heavily on what Kate's been doing. And thank Blythe for doing such a great job of getting us through this, of course, as well as Greg for being our leader. I don't know, I think that's probably enough. We can give you a whole 5 minutes back from your time, and we appreciate it all. And if you haven't finished up your APRs, good luck with that. If you have, congratulations. It'll be our turn very soon. Thank you and good night.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.